Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story.
Subscribe, like, and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
The first thing I saw was Kevin's grin, stretched ear to ear, beer in one hand, a woman I didn't recognize clinging to the other. My mom, front and center in a giant sun hat, squinting through sunglasses, holding what looked like a tropical drink with some godawful flower poking out of it. Jamie and her boyfriend, matching swimwear, smug as always. Even Uncle Dave, who I didn't think could walk without complaining about his hip, was in that damn photo, standing chest-deep in clear turquoise water, holding a cigar like he was Tony Montana. It was posted just 10 minutes ago, but already had 57 likes, and a comment from someone named Cheryl. Looks amazing. Whole fam together. I stared at that comment for a long time. Whole fam together. Except me. There was no tag. No message. No warning. Just a full-color, high-definition reminder that I didn't belong in my own family's definition of together. At first, I thought maybe it was an old photo. But then I saw Kevin's youngest, Molly, wearing the same orange swim shirt I'd helped them buy for last summer's pool season, and she was clearly 2 inches taller than I remembered. This was new. This was recent. And I hadn't even gotten a damn text. Now, I'm not the sensitive type. I've lived through tougher things than a social snub. I run a small but thriving auto repair business in Milwaukee, got my hands dirty for over 2 decades to make it work. I've been yelled at, stiffed, robbed once, and sued twice. I've eaten lunch on a shop bench while reading paperwork stained with grease. I've paid bills I shouldn't have had to pay and watched people who barely said thank you benefit off my back. But this? This was something else. They didn't just forget to invite me. They made a decision. A deliberate one. They chose sunshine, drinks, and ocean air without the one guy who, in some twisted way, made all their comfort possible. And that fact dug under my skin like a splinter I couldn't pull out. I sat back in my office chair, staring at the screen as the photo slowly refreshed from a comment added by my cousin Jamie. Best family trip ever. So glad we could all get away for a bit. All get away. It hit me like a gut punch. I paid off Kevin's second mortgage just 6 months ago when he called crying about how the bank was going to take the house. I gave my mom $5,000 in December, supposedly for groceries and heating. Jamie? She crashed her SUV into a mailbox last year and came sobbing to me because her insurance had lapsed. I didn't lecture. I didn't scold. I just wired her 12 grand and told her to be more careful. And now they're all sipping rum punches under palm trees while I eat a microwaved beef burrito in a garage office that smells like brake fluid and loneliness. Something in me went cold. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't comment. I didn't text anyone and ask what the hell was going on. That's what they wouldn't have expected. That's the Rick they knew, dependable Rick. Quiet Rick. Fix-it Rick. The guy who'd grumble, get mad for a day, and then show up at Thanksgiving with a pie and an extra bottle of wine because God forbid someone feel awkward. Not this time. This time, I just opened my bank's admin dashboard. A calm, methodical kind of anger took over, not explosive, not emotional, just precise. I opened each scheduled payment like I was cutting cords. The $700 monthly transfer to mom, gone. The tuition assistance for Kevin's kids' school, canceled. Jamie's car payment backup account I'd been maintaining, closed. The cabin they all liked using up in Door County, the one I paid property taxes on while they trashed it every 4th of July. I pulled up the real estate agent's number and sent a text. And then I sat back and listened to the silence. No alerts. No pings. No panicked messages yet, just the ticking of the old clock above my desk and the buzz of a fly that refused to die. The family hadn't noticed I was missing before. Let's see how long it takes now. I guess what cut the deepest wasn't the money. It wasn't even the lying. It was the clarity. That moment when all the little pieces, all the times I'd been left out of conversations, all the events I found out about secondhand, all the little jokes I didn't quite understand, suddenly snapped together like a cruel puzzle. I wasn't really one of them. They liked my wallet. They liked what I could do. But me? The man I am, rough around the edges, plain-spoken, not vacation material, I was an inconvenience to their curated little family image. I wouldn't fit in with the poolside selfies and seafood dinners and overpriced yoga classes at sunrise. I'd wear boots to brunch and probably ask if the fish was fried. So, they didn't invite me. They didn't even lie about it. They just erased me. And for once, I wasn't going to fight for my spot at a table that had no chair for me. Let them live their best lives. Let them feel the sun on their faces and post their filtered memories. But when the bills came due, and they always come due, they'd notice something was missing. And maybe, just maybe, they'd look back at that group photo and realize it wasn't the whole fam after all. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they never will. But either way, I'm done chasing belonging. You know that moment when your stomach drops and you realize the people you've poured into would never do the same for you? That moment when a smile on someone else's face somehow becomes the worst thing you've seen all day? Yeah, that moment changes a man. And I changed. No announcement. No fireworks. Just one quiet man staring at a picture and choosing silence over begging for inclusion. They'll figure it out eventually. And when they call, well, that phone might just keep ringing. I think the moment I finally understood how far the gap had grown between me and the rest of them came 3 weeks before that photo, back when we all gathered at Kevin's place for one of those early summer barbecues he throws, just to remind everyone he has a deck. It was one of those forced get-togethers where nobody really wants to be there, but they show up out of guilt or habit, smile tight-lipped, and nurse beers while making conversation with people they wouldn't speak to if they weren't blood. I showed up in my work boots and jeans because I'd come straight from the shop, hadn't had time to shower, still smelled faintly of diesel and rubber, but hell, that's what I do, that's who I am. Jamie's wife, who's always had a nose so high in the air I'm surprised it doesn't catch bird shit, looked me up and down and gave one of those tight, fake smiles that tells you everything she's thinking without saying a word. Later, she whispered something into Jamie's ear and both of them chuckled in that way people do when they're trying to make you feel small but don't want to be caught outright. It's funny how much can be said without saying anything at all. Kevin, my younger brother by 2 years and the golden child since the day he figured out how to pronounce Chardonnay, pulled me aside while I was flipping burgers, said something like, "You ever think about updating your look a little? Lose the flannel, maybe get a haircut that doesn't say gas station mechanic." I laughed. Thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He was genuinely trying to rebrand me, like I was some kind of PR liability to the family's aesthetic. He was standing there in boat shoes and a salmon-colored polo shirt, sipping craft beer with a wedge of orange in it, and I realized I didn't recognize the guy anymore. He used to sneak out of high school dances with me to go drink warm beer in the back of my truck. Now he was worried I'd clash with the throw pillows on his patio furniture. That whole day had an edge to it, like I was being tolerated more than welcomed, like I was the guy who gets invited just so they don't have to deal with the guilt of leaving him out. But once he shows up, everyone sort of wishes he hadn't. The jokes didn't land the same way. My stories, the kind that used to get laughs, were met with polite nods, or that glazed-over look that says, "We're not on the same page anymore." I offered to help Jamie's boyfriend move their broken treadmill out of the garage, and he told me not to worry. They had a guy coming Monday. A guy. Like I wasn't already right there, capable and willing. It wasn't about the treadmill. It was about the fact that I wasn't part of their polished little world anymore. So when I heard through a friend of a friend, not even directly, that Jamie had said, Rick wouldn't fit in, this trip is more our vibe, it didn't shock me. It stung, sure. It burned like whiskey in a fresh wound. But it didn't shock me, because somewhere along the line, I stopped being Rick the dependable, Rick the older cousin who taught them how to change a tire and sneak into R-rated movies. I became Rick the rough draft, someone they'd outgrown, or maybe just rewritten in their heads as a lovable but out-of-place relic of another time. And what really stuck in my throat was how no one pushed back on that. Not Kevin. Not Mom. Not even Uncle Dave, who used to tell me I reminded him of himself back in the day, before arthritis and second divorces dulled his fire. They let Jamie say it. And they agreed with her by their silence. Because that's what silence really is, right? It's agreement in disguise. It's a vote you cast without raising your hand. So while they were booking oceanfront rooms and planning excursions and laughing about how Rick would have made things awkward, I was here, in the same house, driving the same truck, doing the same work, and for the first time in years, seeing everything clearly. You ever get that? That moment where the whole dynamic of your relationships flips like a switch, and you see that the role you've been playing, the one you thought was needed, was just something they kept around until it got too inconvenient? That was me. I was the guy who paid the emergency bills, who fixed broken things, who showed up early and stayed late. But I wasn't someone they wanted on the beach beside them when the cameras came out. I didn't match their Instagram aesthetic. I didn't order skinny margaritas or wear those straw hats that make middle-aged men look like they're trying out for a Jimmy Buffett tribute band. I'd stand out. I'd ruin the vibe. So they left me out. And what they didn't know, what they'll never understand, is that I would have been fine with that. Hell, I don't even like hot weather. I burn easy and I hate sand in my shoes. But they didn't just exclude me from a vacation. They confirmed something I'd always suspected but never wanted to believe, that I was part of the foundation they built their lives on, but not part of the life itself. Like the pipes behind the wall. Useful, but unsightly. So when they come back, tan and broke and hungover from paradise, they're going to find the walls cracked. And no one left to fix them. Because this time, I'm not going to beg. Not for an explanation. Not for a seat. And definitely not for their damn vibe. The funny thing about giving people money is that after a while, they stop seeing it as something you give and start seeing it as something they're owed, like some silent agreement was drawn up in the background, and signed but binding, one that says, Rick's got us, always. It creeps in slowly, first as appreciation, then expectation, and finally entitlement. You blink and realize that you've built someone else's life more carefully than your own, just because you could. It was Monday morning when I opened the banking app, the one I use for all the side support, the soft loans, the quiet lifelines, the unspoken guarantees that someone else's emergency wouldn't turn into a crisis. I'd used it 100 times before, but that morning it felt different, like I was walking into a room I no longer belonged in. The numbers were all there, neat and automatic. $700 like clockwork, scheduled to hit Mom's account on the 1st of every month. I'd been sending it for 6 years. Started when she had that fall in the kitchen and couldn't work for a while. Then it became groceries, and then utility bills, and after a while, it just was like the sunrise, like rent, like gravity. I hovered my thumb over the cancel button longer than I expected. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe guilt. Maybe a sign. Maybe that small, pathetic hope that someone would call and say, "Hey, you okay? Something feel off?" But no one did. The silence held steady, and I tapped the screen. It was done. Cancelled. Just like that. The next tab was Kevin's. For the past 2 years, I'd been covering part of his daughter's school tuition. Not all of it, but enough to matter, enough that, without it, there'd be questions asked and answers he wouldn't want to give. Kevin had never once called it a loan, but he never called it a gift either. It existed in that gray area of family help, where things are supposed to be appreciated but not spoken of, unless someone gets mad. He hadn't thanked me in months. Hell, I don't even think he remembered which card I used. I deleted the transfer. Jamie came last. Hers was the messiest. Her boyfriend, a man named Darren who once told me that working with your hands was for people without degrees, had blown through their savings during some crypto-fueled fever dream, and she came to me, not crying but calculating. She needed help with rent, and said it like it was a business transaction. She'd pay me back when things settle. That was 10 months ago. I hadn't seen a dime. I wasn't angry then. I was used to it. But now, with everything laid out, with that damn beach photo still burned into my mind, I was done being their invisible net. I closed the app and stared at the dark screen for a while, letting the weight of those choices settle into my chest. The silence didn't feel satisfying. It felt heavy, like the first breath you take after holding it too long underwater. I didn't tell them. Not a word. No angry texts, no warnings, no explanations typed out in frustration. Let them find out the way I did, quietly through absence. Let the checks bounce and the questions begin. Let them wonder why the man who always caught their falls wasn't standing there with open arms this time. I looked around my house and saw all the things I'd put on hold for the sake of being generous. The broken screen door I never fixed, the aging roof that needed attention, the worn carpet in the hallway that tripped me every damn morning. I delayed all of it, telling myself that their needs were greater than mine, that family comes first, that it'll come back around eventually. But it never does. It only circles back when they need something else. There was one last thing. The cabin. God, that damn cabin. It wasn't much, small, drafty, smelled like old pine and dust, but it had been mine. Bought it cheap 10 years ago with some bonus cash after a big contract job came through. My name was on the deed, but you'd never know it from how they used it. Jamie held her engagement party there. Kevin's kids called it Uncle Kev's Lake House. Even Mom once told her friends it was our little family place. I paid every property tax, every repair, every new pipe and leaky window fix. I never once charged them for a stay. Never once said no when they asked for a long weekend or needed a place to crash after a breakup or a bad fight. I pulled up the listing agent's contact that afternoon. Sent a message, thinking of selling. Can we talk this week? She replied in under 10 minutes. Said she'd been waiting for me to change my mind. Said she already had buyers who would pay in cash. I didn't tell anyone in the family. I just started packing up the loose tools and old fishing gear I'd left behind. Drove up there alone that weekend. Spent a few hours walking through each room, remembering all the things that once made me feel needed, valuable, not just present, but wanted. And then I locked the door behind me and tossed the key into the glove box without a second thought. On the drive back, with nothing but the sound of the road and the hum of my truck, I realized something strange. I felt lighter. Not happy, not free, not even resolved. Just lighter. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize was mine to set down. Funny how you never really feel like you own something until you decide to take it away. Until you say, no more, and close the door. That silence they gave me? I gave it back. And this time, I meant it. At first, they thought it was a mistake, some kind of glitch in the bank system, maybe a transfer held up or a delay from the holiday weekend. They didn't call right away, didn't ask, didn't check in. They assumed things would fix themselves the way they always had, because for as long as they could remember, things did. Whenever money got tight or plans fell apart, Rick was the one who smoothed it over quietly, without drama, without judgment, without needing recognition. That's the role I played in their lives, silent support, dependable as sunrise, never needing a thank you. But this time, nothing came. Jamie's boyfriend, the same guy who once told me I was too blue-collar to understand real estate investments, was the first to feel the sting. The car payment, the one I used to cover for them during rough months, was due. Darren had just upgraded to a newer model, something flashy and over-leveraged, thinking the cushion was always there. When it bounced and the bank sent a final notice warning, Jamie called Kevin first, panicking. Kevin told her to wait it out, said I'd probably just forgotten. Then she checked the account and realized the payment wasn't coming late. It wasn't coming at all. Kevin didn't believe it at first. He figured maybe I'd switched banks, or maybe there was a mix-up. But then his kid came home from school with a letter tucked into her backpack, one of those impersonal, coldly worded notices from the administration explaining that her tuition hadn't been paid in full, and until it was settled, she wouldn't be allowed to return next semester. It was blunt. Embarrassing. His wife hit the roof. Kevin called the school and promised to look into it, But what he did after that was pull up our last bank interaction and realize, in slow-motion horror, that there had been no mistake. I'd pulled the plug. Completely. Quietly. Permanently. The calls started then. Not a flood, but a slow trickle, the kind that tells you people are scrambling in the background, trying to keep up appearances, hoping you'll break the silence first. Jamie left a voicemail, chipper on the surface, but clearly strained underneath. Hey, cuz, I think there was some kind of hiccup with the rent account. Not sure if you switched banks or something, let me know. Darren got on the line after her and tried to act casual, his tone cocky and fake, like we were still buddies from some shared inside joke that never existed. I didn't respond. I didn't even listen to the whole message. Kevin texted 3 times over the course of a day. Each message more clipped than the last. The final one just said, "Can you call me man? This is serious." I didn't answer. I was already somewhere else, in my head, in my memories, back in a smaller house, one with stained carpet and cheap paneling on the walls, back when I was 16 and they all went to Disneyland without me. I remember that day like it happened last week, not 3 decades ago. I had a fever, one of those heavy ones where your bones feel too big for your body, and Mom said it'd be better if I stayed behind. "You'll be miserable on the rides," she told me while folding laundry, not looking at me, not asking how I felt about being left. Kevin was 14 then, still bouncing off the walls about Space Mountain and churros. Jamie, even younger, ran through the living room with Mickey ears already on her head, giggling like this was the best moment of her life. I watched them pack, watched them load the car, watched them wave from the driveway while I stood on the porch holding a bottle of Gatorade and a cold compress. They came back 4 days later with matching t-shirts and sunburns and stories about parades and fireworks and overpriced food. Mom handed me a keychain with my name on it, cheap plastic, a souvenir bought last minute, probably from a gas station near the airport. She smiled like it made everything okay. I said thank you, and that was that. I'd forgotten about that trip until now. Or maybe not forgotten, maybe just buried it deep enough that I could pretend it hadn't mattered. But it did. It always did. And now, as I sat in my kitchen with a cup of black coffee and the morning news humming in the background, I realized that not much had changed in all these years. They still went without me. They still smiled for pictures and made new memories and left me behind, always with some excuse, some practical reason that made it easier to ignore what it really was, exclusion wrapped in politeness. Mom's voicemail came later that night. I didn't answer, but I listened to the recording because her voice still hits me in a way the others don't. She started with my name, soft and careful, Ricky, sweetheart, like I was still that sick boy on the porch, holding a bottle of Gatorade. She told me she didn't know what was going on, that everyone was confused, that I hadn't answered anyone's calls, and it was starting to scare her. Then her tone shifted, just a little, just enough for the guilt to leak through. "If this is about the vacation, Ricky, I wish you wouldn't take it so personally. We didn't mean anything by it. You're punishing all of us over something small. That's not fair, honey." That's when I hit pause. Not because I couldn't listen, but because I'd already heard everything I needed to hear. I wasn't punishing anyone. I wasn't lashing out or trying to hurt them. I was just done. Done pretending I didn't notice. Done pretending the scraps they tossed me were meals. Done pretending that love meant always giving while receiving nothing but silence, excuses, and guilt when I finally stopped. They were panicking now, watching the walls shake because the foundation they'd taken for granted was gone. And I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt, still, like I'd finally stopped swimming upstream and started floating on my own. It was just after noon when I saw her pull into the lot, that smug little Audi she always bragged about, the one I helped her co-sign when her credit was still circling the drain, glinting like a mirror in the sun. She parked too close to the dumpster, like the idea of being near something dirty made her nervous, and when she stepped out, her heels clicked like they were trying to announce her arrival before she said a word. I watched through the front window of the shop, half hoping she'd just drop off a letter or package or something anonymous and be gone before I had to hear that familiar syrupy tone that she uses when she wants something. But no such luck. Jamie strutted in like she was walking into a boutique, not an auto shop that smelled like rubber, sweat, and WD-40. Her sunglasses stayed on longer than necessary, like she was building up to some kind of entrance, and when she finally pushed them up onto her head, her smile spread in that fake, high-gloss way that meant trouble. "Hey, cousin," she said, like we'd just seen each other last week, like she hadn't spent a week in paradise sipping cocktails while I balanced repair invoices and rolled under cars to fix what other people couldn't. "Got a minute to talk?" she asked, already walking past the counter like she owned the place, like I hadn't paid for every bolt in this building myself. I didn't say no. I just nodded toward the back, where we kept a small break area with 2 busted chairs and a stained coffee maker that hadn't worked right in years. She sat down like it was beneath her, crossed her legs, and launched into it before I could even finish sitting down. She started light, like she was easing into the water. Told me how they'd meant to tell me about the trip, how it all happened so fast, how it was Jamie's boyfriend's idea, and Kevin just tagged along and Mom didn't want to rock the boat. "We figured you'd be busy," she said, looking anywhere but at me. "You always say you don't like flying. And honestly, Rick, you would have hated it. It was all seafood and yoga and overpriced wine. Not really your thing." I let her talk. Let her dig herself deeper with every sentence. She kept weaving this half-assed narrative like it would soften the reality, like I was too dense to see through the layers of condescension and guilt. "You wouldn't have liked the ceviche anyway," she said with a little laugh, like that was the moment everything would turn light again, like we'd chuckle, high-five, and move on like old pals. But the thing is, it wasn't about the damn ceviche. It was about every time I was quietly written out of the picture because someone decided I didn't fit the frame. It was about all the small moments that stacked up like bricks until they built a wall between me and the people I used to think were my people. And now she was sitting in front of me, pretending this was just a misunderstanding, something we could brush off if I would just get over myself and remember my place. So I got up, walked to the filing cabinet by the service desk, and pulled out a manila folder I'd been holding onto for a couple weeks. Inside was the final repair invoice for the cabin, plumbing, roof patch, and the replacement dock boards they all insisted could wait for another year. The repairs totaled just over $9,000. I'd paid every cent out of pocket to get it ready for the listing. I dropped the folder in front of her, opened it to the last page, and pointed to the bottom line. "You and Kevin can split it," I said. "You used it more than I did anyway." Her face changed immediately. The smile cracked. The charm drained out like someone popped a balloon. "Wait, are you serious? You're selling it? You're actually billing us for that?" Her voice was sharp now, shrill and rising like steam. "Rick, you never asked us to pay for anything before." I nodded once. "I'm not asking. I'm informing." She pushed the folder back across the table like it was something rotten, then stood up fast enough to knock over the cheap plastic chair behind her. "You know what? This is exactly why we didn't want you there," she snapped, her voice suddenly raw and honest in a way it hadn't been in years. "You suck the fun out of everything. You make everything so serious, so heavy. We just wanted to relax without feeling like we owed somebody something." I let that sit for a moment. Let her hear the words echo in her own head. Then I said, "You do owe somebody something. You just got used to pretending you didn't." She stormed out without another word. Got into her car so fast, she almost clipped the bumper of a customer's Subaru on the way out. I watched her go, not angry, not satisfied, just hollow. Not because I'd expected anything different, but because somewhere deep down, there was still a part of me that wanted her to say, "I'm sorry we treated you like you didn't matter." Not for the apology, not for forgiveness, but just to know someone saw the damage. But I didn't get that. And maybe I never will. Because when people only show up after the money stops flowing, they're not there for you, they're there for the faucet. And I've finally shut it off. It was sometime around 9 in the evening when the phone rang again. Same number I'd seen blinking across my screen a dozen times in the past week. Same ringtone I hadn't bothered to change in years, a relic from back when I still got excited to hear from family. I sat there on the edge of my bed with a cup of tea that had gone cold and my boots still on, not sure why I answered this time, but knowing deep down I had to, because you only get so many chances to hear your mother's voice when it matters. Her voice came through the line like wind through brittle leaves, soft, trembling, and barely holding itself together. "Ricky?" she asked, not the sharp Rick they all use now, but the name I hadn't heard since I was a boy with scabbed knees and too much heart. I said, "Yeah, I'm here," and for a moment neither of us spoke. There was just that quiet static that makes you feel like the line could break at any second, like maybe that would be easier for both of us. She sniffled once, then twice, and I could hear the rustling of tissue against the receiver. "I didn't know," she said, barely above a whisper. "About the trip. I didn't know they didn't tell you. I thought you said you didn't like flying. I thought maybe you'd just said no." It would have been so easy to believe her, to fall back into that familiar rhythm of forgiveness, to let her words be enough. But I'd had enough of filling in the blanks with kindness that hadn't been returned, and I'd learned a hard truth lately, that silence isn't always innocent, and not speaking up when something's wrong doesn't make you a peacemaker, it makes you a participant. "So you didn't say no," I said quietly, staring at the wall like it might offer some wisdom. There was a pause on the line long enough that I could hear the TV in the background, something generic and cheerful, a distraction from the guilt she hadn't expected to carry this far into her life. "I didn't want to cause a scene," she finally said, and it landed like a weight across my chest. "Jamie said it would be awkward with everyone trying to relax and you being, well, you've been so tired lately, and you always say you don't like crowds. Kevin said it was a quick thing. Last minute. I didn't know it would hurt you like this." The thing is, I wasn't even mad at her in that moment, not the way I had been with Jamie or Kevin or Darren or any of the others who used me like a credit card with no expiration date. I was something worse than mad. I was disappointed. Disappointed because I'd spent most of my adult life thinking that if I just kept showing up, if I just kept providing and fixing and patching over every little crack in our family's foundation, maybe I'd earn my way back into the circle. Maybe love was something you could buy in installments. But all I really bought was silence. "I love you," I said, and I meant it even with everything between us, because love doesn't disappear overnight, not even when it's bruised. But I'm done bankrolling people who think I'm a burden. I'm not angry anymore, Mom. I'm just done being useful instead of loved. She let out a long breath that cracked in the middle, and I pictured her sitting on that old plaid couch with her hands in her lap, the house too quiet now that no one was calling to ask for help or money or a ride. "I didn't mean to make you feel like that," she said. "You've always been the strong one. The one we could count on." "Yeah," I said, trying not to let the lump in my throat take over. "That's the problem." She didn't argue. She didn't offer to pay me back or defend Jamie or explain why Kevin thought it was okay to cut me out like trimming fat from meat. She just sat with the silence, and maybe for the first time in years, she really heard what it meant. I don't know how long we stayed on the phone like that, but when she finally said goodbye, her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it, not weak, not defeated, just real. After I hung up, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel justified or strong or victorious. I just felt hollow. Because sometimes the worst betrayals aren't loud. They're quiet. They hide in moments when people say nothing, when they look the other way while you're being pushed aside. And it's those silences, those complicit little nods, that leave the deepest scars because they're the ones you never saw coming. I sat in that stillness for a long time, listening to the ticking of the kitchen clock and the occasional sound of a car passing by outside. The house felt too big, too quiet, too clean. I thought about calling her back, telling her it was okay, that I forgave her, that I didn't mean to make this so heavy. But I didn't, because I needed her to sit with it too. For the first time in a long while, I wanted them to feel what I'd been feeling all these years, not out of spite, not to punish, but because that's the only way some people learn. You take away the thing they've always assumed will be there, and then you watch how quickly they remember what it was worth. Maybe she'll call again. Maybe next time, she won't cry. Maybe next time, she'll say the thing I didn't even know I needed to hear. Or maybe she won't. But I know now that I won't be waiting for it. I'll be living without it. It was Thursday morning when Kevin showed up at the shop, unannounced, standing just outside the office window with his arms crossed and his mouth set in that crooked half-frown he always wore when he didn't know how to start a conversation he didn't want to have. I saw him standing there for a good 10 seconds before I pushed the door open and leaned against the frame, not saying a word, not giving him the warm smile he probably expected, but wasn't going to get. He looked uncomfortable, maybe from the cold air, maybe from guilt, maybe just from knowing the usual routine, me making space, him talking his way out, was over. He gave me a short nod, the kind that said, "I'm here, but not, I'm sorry, at least not yet." "Hey," he muttered, glancing around like he was hoping no one else would be watching this fall from grace. "Can we talk for a minute?" I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes either. I just turned and walked back inside, trusting he'd follow if he had the guts to finish what he came here for. He stepped in behind me and shut the door, already fiddling with the hem of his coat, a nervous tic I remembered from when we were kids and he used to lie about stealing candy from the corner store. "I think things got a little out of hand," he started, his voice somewhere between casual and cautious, the tone of a man trying to defuse a bomb with a plastic spoon. "I talked to Mom. She's pretty upset. Said you had some kind of falling out." He didn't mention the part where I stopped paying for his daughter's private school or where Jamie drove away from my shop looking like she'd swallowed a mouthful of glass. No, he was here to patch it up with soft words and vague regrets, hoping maybe the whole mess could be swept under a rug big enough to cover the years of silence, assumptions, and backhanded exclusion. "I get that you're mad," he said, which was his first real mistake, because I wasn't mad. I was awake. "But you gotta admit, sometimes you take things too personally. Not everything's an attack, Rick. Sometimes people just need a break from the drama." That's all it was. A break. That word, drama, hit harder than it should have. Drama, like I was a show they'd grown tired of watching. Like my presence at a family gathering was a burden, an act in some sad play that dragged down the whole production. It was a neat little excuse, wrapped up in therapist speak, polished for maximum deflection. And then he slipped. Because he couldn't help himself. Because people like Kevin always talk too long when they think they're the smartest one in the room. He said, "Look, Mom didn't mean any harm. She just said not to tell you, 'cause it would make things awkward, that's all." And there it was. Clearer than anything he'd said before. The truth. The part one hadn't even let myself believe. That Mom knew that she wasn't just some innocent bystander lost in the shuffle, but part of it. She'd helped plan the damn trip. She was in the photo smiling under that wide-brimmed hat, sipping drinks, surrounded by the very people who'd decided I was better left behind. She wasn't blindsided. She was on board. And when the choice came down to saying something or staying quiet, she said nothing. Because saying something might have made someone else uncomfortable, and the weight of my discomfort, apparently, didn't count. I didn't say a word. Not then. I just looked at him and let the silence stretch long enough for him to squirm in it, to feel what I'd been sitting in for weeks now. He tried to backpedal. Tried to explain how it was complicated, how everyone was just trying to keep the peace, how it wasn't meant to be personal, as though erasing someone could ever be anything but. "I can make it right," he finally said, his voice thinner now, all the confidence drained out. "We can talk to Mom, get everyone together, figure out what went wrong. Maybe we can fix it." I looked him in the eye then, calm as ever, and said the truest thing I'd spoken in years. "You already did. You showed me exactly who I am to you. And that was it." He didn't have a comeback for that. He opened his mouth once, then closed it. Nodded slowly, like he was trying to absorb something he didn't want to admit. Then he turned and walked out the door without another word, his shoulders hunched like he was smaller than when he came in. After he left, I sat down behind the counter and stared at the receipts from that morning's jobs, but I couldn't focus. My head was full of the echoes of that sentence, the one I'd just spoken but had carried for so long. They showed me exactly who I was to them. Not family in the way that matters, not a brother, not a cousin, not a son, but a utility. A backup plan, a financial failsafe, a body they could borrow when needed and set aside when inconvenient. That's not love. That's business. And I wasn't in business with them anymore. Later that night, as I locked up the shop and stepped into the stillness of the parking lot, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting another voicemail from Mom, or maybe another empty apology from Jamie, but the screen showed something else entirely. A voicemail from an unfamiliar number. I stared at it for a long second, thumb hovering just above the play button. And somehow, I already knew that this message wasn't like the rest. The message came sometime after midnight, tucked between spam calls and voicemail alerts I hadn't bothered to clear in days, and if I'm being honest, I almost didn't play it. I was tired, the kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with being stretched too thin for too long, and my thumb hovered over the delete button like it had a mind of its own. But something about the number, unfamiliar, not blocked, not masked, made me hesitate. It wasn't Kevin's, and it wasn't Jamie's. And the length of it, nearly 2 full minutes, told me this wasn't another half-hearted apology or another plea disguised as a guilt trip. I sat there in the kitchen, the house so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum and the creak of the wood under my feet when I shifted in my chair. I'd been nursing the same beer for the better part of an hour, barely touched it, and now it was warm and flat and as stale as the air in that room. I pressed play, more out of instinct than decision. "Hi, Uncle Rick," the voice began, soft and cracking at the edges. "It's Molly." And just like that, the air left the room. Molly, Kevin's daughter. The one who used to sit on my shoulders every 4th of July, who once cried when I left early from her 8th birthday party because a customer's truck broke down on the highway. The same kid who told me, not even a year ago, that I made the best pancakes in the world, better than her dad, better than IHOP, better than anyone. She was 11 now, maybe 12, and her voice had started to stretch, no longer the high-pitched chirp of a child, but something wobbling into teenage uncertainty. "I don't know what happened," she said, and I could hear the tears behind her words, the way kids try to talk through it but can't quite pull the pieces together. "Dad's been really stressed, and Grandma cries a lot when she thinks no one's looking. I asked what was wrong, and they just say, 'Grown-up stuff, but I know it's about you.'" There was a long pause, and I imagined her holding the phone tightly, maybe in her room, maybe under the covers, recording something she wasn't even sure she should be saying. "I miss you," she finally said. "I miss your truck, and the way it smells like the gas station, and your dog, and how you always let me put extra syrup on my pancakes even when Mom said no. I don't know why you're gone, but I wish you weren't." Another pause. A sniffle. The sound of her trying to pull herself together, the way only a kid who's been watching the adults fall apart knows how to do. "I just wanted you to know that I think about you. A lot." And then the line went quiet. No sign-off, no goodbye, no awkward "talk soon." Just silence. Pure, raw, heartbreaking silence. I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand, staring at the floor like it held answers, like maybe somewhere between the scuff marks and dust I'd find a map back to the man I used to be. Not the fixer, not the wallet, but the uncle, the brother, the son. I didn't call her back. Not because I didn't want to, I did, more than I've wanted anything in a long time, but because I didn't know what I'd say. Because what do you say to a child who only sees the good parts, who doesn't know the weight of years of being taken for granted, who still thinks you're made of magic and pancakes and loyalty? So I didn't delete the message. I saved it, tucked it away in a folder on my phone like it was something sacred, something I'd want to hear again someday when the cold creeps in too close and I start wondering if maybe, just maybe, I did the wrong thing by walking away. That night, I sat out on the porch with another beer, this one cold and untouched, the sunset bleeding across the sky in streaks of fire and purple and fading blue. The dog lay at my feet, twitching in his sleep like he was chasing something in a dream. I leaned back in the old chair I never got around to fixing and listened to the cicadas sing about endings. And in that stillness, in that fragile quiet where everything feels like it might shatter if you breathe too loud, I thought about all the things I'd lost and all the things I'd finally found. Maybe some ties aren't meant to be cut, I thought. Maybe they're just meant to be loosened. Enough to breathe. Enough to stand without them pulling you down. Enough to feel like yourself again. And I knew, right then, that I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Kevin. Not at Jamie. Not even at Mom. I just saw it all clearer now, the cracks, the silences, the way people love you for what you give instead of who you are. And once you see that, truly see it, you can't unsee it. Not ever. I finished my beer slowly, like a man with time to think. And I let the sun go down without turning on the porch light.